Hi, this is Jeff Shore. You want to execute properly on that core initiative that you're working? You better figure out how to manage the game. Yeah, that's right. Manage the game. Game management is a very, very important concept as it relates to sports, but it also applies into business. And just real simply, when we think about game management in sports, what do we think about? Well, we think about the long-term game plan, and then we think about the short-term game plan. So I might be looking at it and saying, in this game, let's suppose it's a football game. In our long-term plan, as I'm thinking about the entirety of the game, I'm thinking about what game do we want to play? We're going to run up the middle. We're going to beat them on the line. We're going to pound. Or, we're going to throw the ball and throw the ball and throw the ball. Or I can think of the same thing on the defensive side. Doesn't matter. But that's my long-term plan. So then what happens? Based on that long-term plan, now it starts dictating short-term. What am I going to do on each individual play? So what happens here in business is that we've got that process, that program, that initiative that we want to be able to tackle, that initiative that we want to execute on. And oftentimes we'll think, okay, here's my long-term plan. This is what I'm thinking, but we don't spend enough time on each of the individual steps. Or I start thinking, I want to do this, so here I go. What's the first step? But I'm not thinking about how that first step fits into a bigger plan. So I want to recommend to you here that if you're going to follow the model of a general manager of a team or the coach of a team, what are you going to do? You're going to build your long-term game plan first. And then you're going to go in and build each of the short-term plans. There are a lot of mini plans inside the big plan, but that's really how execution works. I get clarity on what I'm trying to accomplish. And this is why in this series we've been talking about it all along to say goal clarity first, followed by passion, and now we get into the game plans. The long-term game plan first, and then, great, what is the short-term game plan? I have to be able to manage the game. You see, as I'm going along with those short-term plans, each individual play, sometimes they'll work beautifully, sometimes not so much. But even my adjustments will be consistent with what my big-term plan is. So if that long-term plan is not in place, then the short-term plan is not going to work very well. So I want to challenge you to look at it from that perspective. Let's suppose that you've got a business initiative where you're looking at it and you're saying, we want to do a marketing outreach or a sales outreach to this specific targeted group of people over here, okay? So what are we going to do to get there? Well, before we do that, what do? We ask the big question of why am I trying to do this? What is my goal clarity? What is the reason that makes sense to me? And then I'm going to look at it and say, how am I going to go about doing that on the big picture? What does the long-term game plan look like? Am I going to be more aggressive? Am I going to use multiple approaches here to reach them? Or going to go with a single targeted approach? And then once I've gotten that figured out, I'll figure out the specific steps, each individual play that will help me accomplish that long-term plan. All right, that's the way it works. Get the long-term game plan figured out first, then the short-term game plan will be so much easier to execute. And that's when it all comes together.